Hello, everybody. I'm Senator Josh Becker. For those, thank you all for joining for our town hall today about phones in schools. And for those of you zooming in from Southern California, I represent the District 13, which is the peninsula, the Bay Area Peninsula between San Francisco and San Jose. Although I'm actually in a hotel room in Los Angeles right now. And I'm very pleased to be doing this jointly with my colleague, Senator Henry Stern, who represents Senate District 27, including North Los Angeles County and cities such as Thousand Oaks and Simi Valley. Henry, happy to be doing this with you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for everyone joining in. I know people are still signing on, so welcome. Had really great responses from both North and Southern California. We're very lucky to have a special guest here with us to kick this off here today as well. And I think, Josh, one of the big things here is I'm here as senator, but I'm also here as dad. And I think our special guest has that similar experience of having to be a public leader and also a parent. So, it's really informed our work, I think, of having people who want to be good parents, kind of afraid of what's going on all around them and seeing the damage in their own lives and in the lives around them. And so I just appreciate not just the teachers, administrators, principals, but also the parents who've taken time to sign on. We know how busy your lives are, so we appreciate you. And Josh, I'll let you be the official introducer here.
Good. Well, yeah, I'll do a little bit of the run of show, but you're right. We're both here as dads. I have two kids. I just lived this. My youngest just graduated from high school, so I just lived this over the last 6 years with two kids in high school, and so we feel this very personally. In fact, I mentioned the first partner at some point about creating a dad's caucus. I think you like that idea, which we have not done. But yeah, we're both here as policymaker and as dads, and we will talk about in the course of today about some legislation, including by Senator Stern, that the legislature passed this year on the topic of phones in schools, and also a little more broadly about social media and our youth. Today, we're going to hear from three panelists. We'll have Dr. Drew Singal from UC Davis, who will present some research about the health effects of social media on students. We'll hear from two educators who already have smartphone-free policies in their schools and district. That's what I'm really excited about, to hear from those educators on the front lines who have done this, are doing this, and can tell us what's working, what's not working, what's been difficult about it, and what some of the results have been. We'll have Deirdre Menares from the Ventura Unified School District and Yvonne Shu of San Mateo High School District, which has been doing this since 2019. Then after that presentation, we'll walk through questions that have been submitted in advance, as well as questions that you submit using the Q&A function on Zoom. Before we get to the rest of the agenda, we are very fortunate, as Senator Stern said, to have the first partner, Jennifer Siebel-Newsome, here with us today. I'm going to do a very quick introduction. She is many things: a dedicated advocate for California's children and families, a voice for working women, a champion of initiatives that support children's mental and physical health. I know how important mental health and mental health of our kids is for the first partner. She's an award-winning filmmaker, and if you've not seen her films, you should please check them out. And she's an influential thought leader on gender equity. She's also married, of course, to our governor, Gavin Newsom. They have 4 kids. So like many of us this evening, she has firsthand experience with kids, smartphones, social media, and the challenges that come along with technology, including at school. Please join me in welcoming our first partner, Jennifer Siebel-Newsome.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you. And thank you, Senators Josh Becker and Senator Henry Stern, for convening us for this most critical conversation about raising our children safely and healthily in a digital age. I'm especially grateful to be speaking with so many engaged parents, caregivers, educators, and community members who are deeply invested in the well-being of California children and our world's children, for that matter. So obviously we're all here because we recognize the powerful influence that technology has on our lives and on our children's lives, and because we want tech to be a force for good. not harm. And as a mom of 4 myself, I know how hard it can be. My children are supposed to get no more than 45 minutes of screen time on weekends after they finish their chores and breakfast, which includes walking the dogs and making their beds. But regulating their time is an ongoing battle. They easily navigate around parental controls while I get distracted and lose track of their time. Monitoring their tech use really provokes unnecessary battles in our household. And don't get me started on my 15-year-old. She's the sweetest, most gentle human, but I feel like some of it's hormonal, but I do feel like I've lost so much of her when she turned 14 and we gave her a smartphone. I was so proud of myself in delaying that gift until 14 because I knew that it would protect her in the long run, but I still see how quickly the device and really the engagement on addictive social media, how harmful that can be. So this near constant struggle to protect our kids from these addictive technologies and harmful predatory content online is omnipresent. And it feels like it's becoming a 21st century parenting skill to survive these years. And it's why conversations like this are so important. And because when we talk with other parents, we all understand that we're not alone in our worries, that we share a collective understanding that whether it's smartphone use in schools or the near constant, darkness affiliated with too much social media use or too much time online, it just feels like an uphill battle with no end in sight. So we know that recent data backs up what we all know and see, that excessive smartphone use is linked to increased anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges. I'm sure you've seen all of these statistics, but the Pew Research Center survey found that 72% of high school and 33% of middle school teachers see smartphone distractions as a major problem. And it's been unveiled that 97% of students use their smartphones during the school day for a median of 43 minutes. For kids like my 2 eldest who have dyslexia and some ADHD, these distractions are, more tempting and really prevent kids with learning differences in particular from engaging holistically in their education and building these healthy in-person relationships. At the same time, social media adds an even more profound concern for our girls. This is the subject matter of my next documentary, Misrepresentation 2.0. It's called Misrepresentation: The Revolution. But many girls report feeling addicted to certain platforms, and more than half of teenagers say that it would be hard to give up social media altogether. This constant exposure, as we know, and as I've said before, takes a real toll on their mental health in particular, from body dysmorphia and disordered eating to sleep problems and beyond. And don't get me started on the algorithmic damage being done to our boys and young men who are being exposed to toxic masculinity like never before. Obviously, in California, we're addressing these issues head on. In 2019, Governor Newsom signed Assembly Bill 272, giving school districts the authority to regulate smartphone use during school hours. This law empowers schools to reduce distractions and create healthier learning environments for students. And then we've seen schools take action in districts like Santa Barbara Unified and Ballard High in Fresno, obviously having reported positive results from limiting smartphone use, including higher test scores, improved grades, increased student engagement, and even reductions in bullying. And these districts, and the ones represented here today, San Mateo and Ventura, demonstrate a promising way forward. And I'm so grateful to all of you. Last month, as we know, and it's a bummer it sort of took this long, I think we all were a bit distracted with the pandemic, but the governor signed Assembly Bill 3216, the Phone Free Schools Act, which, thank you, Senator Stern, you co-authored. The act really limits smartphone use during the school hours to ensure that students have space to focus on learning without the constant digital distractions. But even with these laws in place, we know that families need resources and support now. And that's why we released the Tech Life Balance Social Emotional Health Report and Guide with my nonprofit, the California Partners Project. The Family Guide offers research-backed insights to help families foster stronger communication and resilience We know how important this is because we know that meaningful adult-child connections are the best defense against today's digital challenges, just as they are against all the other pressures, right, that teens historically have experienced with alcohol and drugs and, exposure to pornography, violent pornography, et cetera. So I encourage all of you to check out these resources and share them with your communities. You can find them at www.calpartnersproject.org. But aside from that, I really want to thank you for joining this important conversation. We know that the evidence is clear that reducing smartphone use in the classroom leads to better outcomes for our kids and a healthier future for all. And again, I just want to reiterate that as parents, the governor and I understand this profoundly and are committing to righting this harm and committing to working in partnership, united by our collective priority, that our priority to our, not just our state's children, but again, our world's children. And by working together, we will, and I'm very confident in this, that we will create safer, healthier digital environments for our children and for future generations, allowing them not just to flourish, but to thrive. So in partnership always, thank you again for including me.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you for your leadership and for the governor's leadership. You mentioned a few of the bills that'll be critical part of all this. And we'll mention a few more as we go along too, that the legislature passed this year around cyberbullying and school social media policies as we go along. So thank you so much. Let me turn it over to Senator Stern quickly for any quick reaction.
Well, you wanted me, yeah, I was supposed to introduce the expert panelists, but then the first partner kind of just did it. So I know Dr. Singal, I know you're waiting in the wings here, but the depth, the substance, it's everyone watching now understands why California has stepped into this space and had a leader, because right at the very top, it's somebody who actually understands what we're going through and knows the solutions too. And some of it's going to be law, and some of it's just going to be us taking leadership on our own and getting inspired, and parents getting involved. And that's really what today's about, is just try to find allies, I think. So thanks for being just a huge ally to everyone on this call, and to everyone who feels lost and people who have lost. I know they've got us, but to know someone at the very top of California is a big deal. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much for your leadership. We're in this together, right? And I love this Dad's Caucus.
Okay, all right.
No, it's not real yet, but it is in my eyes.
I saw them carrying, I saw them do that in Congress, and they all carried the babies and the one. I'm like, as long as my kids don't have to be online for it or on CNN, I'm in. As soon as I gotta selfie it, to the, so it's like just dads, I'm good. I'm in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, calpartnersproject.org. Everyone check it out. Thank you again.
Just a gift to
first partner, Jennifer.
Just use it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Best practices.
I like what you said, thrive. Goals to survive and thrive.
Flourish and thrive. That's what we want.
For our kids. Great.
Go find that backpack.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm going to turn it back to Senator Stern to introduce our first expert panelist.
Yeah, so we do want you, as we're going along here, get your questions going, and be sure to start populating that Q&A so that we can roll through here. But to stoke your thinking and to really give you some grounding, we got one of the leading experts in the country on the impact of media choice, smartphones, and impact on human development, and especially on child development. Dr. Drew Singal is an associate professor in the School of Communication at UC Davis. So he's one of our very own here in California. But we're very lucky to have the body of research and some of the practical insights that have influenced, frankly, some legislation that the first partner talked about, some of the bills I've written. So as much as of a fan I was of the first partner, I'm also a secret fan of yours, Dr. Singal. So thank you for showing up and bringing just huge insight to this. So maybe you can share a little bit in your remarks about how our children are being currently impacted, and maybe what some of the solutions are.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you to Senator Becker and Senator Stern for your work on these causes. And I have to say, the first thing is I'm just so heartened that across the board in the state of California, politicians and policymakers are taking research into account when they are making this legislation. It's coming from a place of knowledge. It's coming from a place where we're trying to help families and help children thrive in this digitally saturated world. One thing when I give these kinds of talks, one thing that I like to start with just focusing on is the idea that a smartphone is a tool. It's an incredibly powerful tool, and it's neither good nor bad, just like any tool. It's how you use it, when you use it, with whom you use it. And just like a tool in our toolbox, right? We don't use a hammer for every project around the house. And in that way, we shouldn't use a cell phone for everything that we want to do. There are times and places where cell phones can be great. They can connect kids all around the world. They can help a child who feels alone and who feels like there's no one else out there like them. They can help that child to connect with someone, feel less lonely. Research shows that all is good. However, what has become apparent over the past few years is that cell phones have become more and more a tool that children and adolescents use for everything. And it becomes really hard to stop. It becomes really hard to stop, of course, when every other one of your friends is on their cell phone too. And when I talk to adolescents, and this shouldn't be a surprise to the parents and the educators in the room, but when I talk to adolescents, they say, I'm worried about what this does, but I have to be on my cell phone because that's where my friends are. And forming a peer group, maintaining that peer group's functioning, that's one of the number one developmental goals of adolescence. And so if all of your friends are on the cell phone, it becomes really hard for you to stop. And that's where these policies like phone-free schools or cell phone restrictions in schools become really important, because I think it moves the cell phone from the unconscious, that this is something that I have to do because everyone else is on it, to more conscious. What am I getting out of this when I use it? Why am I using it? And how can I integrate it into my life in a way that's effective and healthy for me, for my friends, and for my family? And research on phone-free schools or schools where cell phones are restricted, like the first partner said, it is coming out where we're finding positive effects of these sorts of policies. In many cases, cell phone-free schools, students show increased testing scores once policies go into place. This is particularly the case for less advantaged students, those coming from a lower socioeconomic status, or those students who were maybe struggling in school for a variety of different reasons in the first place. You might see that there are some studies that show no effects of these kinds of policies, but what I want to point out there is these policies across the United States and around the world are quite varied. Some schools implement a total phone-free policy from the time the bell rings until the time the bell rings at the end of the day, and others show very different policies. I have two friends that are teachers. One works at a school with a phone-free policy that is not enforced at all. So the policy's on the books, but it is a constant battle in that school for them to get students off phones during class time. Another school district with 4,000 students implemented a phone-free bell-to-bell policy this school year, and they spent over 2 years working on that policy and getting buy-in from all the stakeholders that they needed, from parents to teachers to the students themselves to upper administration. And like the first partner said, they understood that they were all in this together. And what they do is the cell phones are away during class time, and then students are allowed to use their cell phones to communicate, to search for information, to do all the great things that we know cell phones can do in passing period. So they still have the opportunity to communicate digitally, but not during school time or not during class time. And this is important because a lot of my research are on the effects of social media on mental health. And what we're finding in the United States and around the world is that there is a consistent link for certain adolescents in certain cases of using social media and increased rates of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and poor body image. What we've been focusing on in our lab here at UC Davis is what is known as ecological momentary assessment. So this is where we will ping an adolescent on their smartphone. We do it over the summer so it doesn't interfere with school. And we ask them 5 points across the day for 3 weeks. What are you on social media? What social media are you on? What are you doing? And how do you feel about yourself right now? And we've done a few of these studies now, and the results are very interesting because they consistently show that about 10 to 20% of adolescents in our samples, and this is in the United States, and we have some colleagues in the Netherlands as well, and it shows very similar, 10 to 20% of adolescents in our sample are susceptible to negative effects of social media on different aspects of mental health. We've shown this now for body image, for a focus on muscularity, for body satisfaction, for general affect or emotion, and for self-esteem. And we just collected data this summer looking at depression, anxiety, and loneliness. And what's interesting about that is you might say, well, 10 to 20% is a small amount of the population. There are 42 million adolescents in the United States. There are about 5.1 million adolescents in the state of California. 10 to 20% is a huge number when you look at it that way. And it kind of drives home that this is a public health concern if that many of our adolescents are susceptible to these negative effects. We also don't know, and we're trying to find this out right now, if one adolescent might be susceptible to negative effects on anxiety and their best friend is susceptible to negative effects on depression, and their best friend is susceptible to negative effects on body image, because then these negative effects start to add up. We've also been doing some research, some cross-cultural research, comparing South Korean adolescents to adolescents in the United States. And what we're finding there is that for both groups, those adolescents that have what we call a problematic relationship with their cell phones and with social media, where they're using it before bed and displacing sleep time, where they're getting into fights with their family because they're on the phone at the dinner table, those have negative relations with mental health, but the effect is double in the United States compared to South Korea. And we think that that has something to do with the increased protections and regulations that South Korea as a federal government has implemented on cell phones and social media companies. And so those are some things that we're trying to help implement in California with the state government. The last thing that I want to talk about, because the first partner mentioned algorithms, we conducted a study last year where we created a bunch of accounts on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, where we interacted with them like we were an adolescent struggling with their mental health. And I was shocked by the content that was recommended to those accounts. It is incredibly dark. It is content that says, I'm alone. I have nothing to live for. Nobody likes me. It was incredibly dark, horrific content that was being recommended to adolescent accounts where they were struggling with their mental health. And that's why, again, I'm very happy to be here and talk about these things, because we have an opportunity as a society at the federal government level and at the state government level to do something about this, to protect our youth. And the cell phone policies in schools are one way that we can lessen the burden on adolescents and parents and families and help all of our adolescents to thrive, grow, and develop. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Stengel. And to have you as a resource for us in the legislature is truly invaluable. Yeah, you know, we were not just dealing with the algorithms, but also even reporting functions for our school districts and our teachers, not just parents and students, but to be able to report on incidents of cyberbullying and force responses out of the social media platform. So even though the theme of today is really about, you know, what do school districts and school boards and schools need to do better to step up, there's this whole other side, which is the platform accountability side. And I I think, thanks to some of your research and some of Senator Becker and I's work, and really, frankly, a governor who's been unafraid on this front of confronting tech, even though he's a pro-tech governor. It's to get algorithm disclosure through the kind of cyberbullying enforcement we now have. Those of you who are going to follow along in the chat, I would just commend to your attention Senate Bill 1504, 1283, and then also SB 976, which is the algorithm bill. And that one, now social media companies are no longer going to have as default settings addictive feeds for users under 18. You can't get notifications during school hours between midnight and 6 a.m. on school days. And then minors' accounts are going to be default and actually locked into private settings to protect youth privacy. So, these are just a few elements. We'll see if they go to court. There have been lawsuits in the past, so we'll see if they try to hide behind federal law or the Constitution, but change is coming. Anyhow, thank you for your time, and we do appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. And if I can just chime in quickly before
please,
we get to the next speaker, I want to add my thanks as well. And, we will send follow everyone who registered. We'll send follow-up, obviously, with the video itself, but also whatever the links that the first partner mentioned, links to some of these bills, and whatever else we think that could be helpful. When we do talk to companies, they say, I met with Google, they say, wait, if you're logged in, hey, then you do get appropriate content. And they showed some examples. So, we'll send that to, and how, parents can try to make sure their kids are logged in. But the reality is some kids aren't logged in, right? And then you see like the content that you mentioned, Dr. Singles, very disturbing. If a kid puts that in and gets even darker content results, extremely, extremely concerning. And we need to hold these, hold the companies accountable. I'm always reminded that TikTok which is ultimately a Chinese company. In China, it's restricted for, I think, kids under 14. It's 45 minutes a day and only educational content and enforced. Whereas, of course, here, you've got kids much younger on it with a full array of content. So anyway, thank you. Now we'll hear from some of the schools themselves.
I think first up, we're going to go with Deirdre Menares, who's the Director of Secondary Education for Ventura Unified. Her district actually just implemented a smartphone and earbud oriented policy. We know that's been a question from some parents and others in the chat about AI-enabled devices, earbuds, things like that. But as somebody who just went through it, Deirdre, love your insights. Thanks for taking some time to join us from a little north of me. We've got some folks definitely some Ventura County folks calling in, but a lot of West San Fernando Valley, in LA and all around. So you've been a pioneer down here. How was it?
Good evening. Thank you, Senator Stern, Senator Becker. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. Ventura Unified actually had board policy prior to our initiative last year. But it has been great, to answer your question, Senator Stern. It's been a very positive transition. I think parents were ready for it. Teachers were definitely ready for it, and administrators were definitely ready for it. And students, while reluctant at first, definitely in the secondary world are more appreciative of it now. Anecdotal evidence anyway. I don't have anything scientific to share, but overall, a really good transition into a stronger, firmer policy that was on the books. But again, Ventura Unified last year just, we had some concerns, a lot of conflicts on campus, as we've already heard regarding social media bullying and things like that, but also conflicts in the classroom. When a teacher has to intervene on cell phone use, that creates conflict between the student and the teacher. And so that creates distraction, and there's a lot of distractibility. So Ventura Unified gathered the teams and sort of reinitiated this policy last year with a little bit more clarity and a lot more publicity, if you will. So is it okay if I share my screen right now? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Am I up? Yes, we're good? Okay. So again, this was just a revamp of a current policy that had been on the books formally, but essentially last year, VUSD promoted a more thorough policy that also included the earbuds, as you mentioned, because they're all Bluetooth now. Even if a cell phone is put away, students are very into their music and listening to all the things. So that became one of the new changes in our policy is students couldn't have their earbuds in at all either because music was playing, they couldn't hear the instruction, they couldn't engage in the learning. And so our goals were to, of course, promote respectful learning environments, minimize distractions. I think as educators learned, and I don't know if Dr. Singal will have any research to back up my next statement, but we're not good multitaskers as human beings. And we can't really do 3 things at once very well. And so trying to learn algebra while listening to your music and looking at your social feed is not a recipe for academic success. So we really wanted to minimize distractions and maximize the academic learning, especially post-pandemic.
Principal, it wasn't coming up, so the team has now shared it, so it's on slide 2. So just tell us which slide to move to.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. It's up on the screen now. It's on
okay,
slide
great.
2. Yeah.
So slide 2. Let's go to slide 3. I already spoke about that, if that's okay. Thank you. So our high school policy is a little bit different than our elementary and middle. High school policy, students may have their phone, but it may never come out during the class time. So once the bell rings and the students have to be in the classroom, that cell phone is silenced and put away, whether it's in a pocket, a backpack, a purse. It cannot be out on the desk. And that's during all instructional time. And this includes our earbuds as well. Harder to find sometimes depending on the student's dress, but that is the current policy. Students may in high school, however, use their phone during passing periods. Not much time, generally 4 to 6 minutes between classes, not much time for that. But they can also use it at all breaks and before school and after school in their transitions to and from sports or things like that. Elementary and middle school is a little bit stricter. Students may have them at school, but they do not come out from that 8 a.m. bell to 3 p.m. bell. So they're not visible. They're not allowed to come out at all during class time, recess, lunchtime, anytime at all. They may have them, but they can't be out or used at any point during the school day. You can go to the next slide. And this is truly the success of any policy, right? Of any practice, especially when it involves students and teachers, because they're the ones that have to do it on the day-to-day, is consistency. Making sure that the messaging is consistent, making sure that their practices are consistent from day to day. And so some of the best practices we found throughout our site, those that are doing this better than others, have it very clearly written in their class syllabi. It's spelled out. It's spoken about at back to school night, so that day in the fall when all the parents come to meet the teachers. It is usually in every classroom and in any presentation. Teachers who have or host websites as a part or in their Canvas where the instruction lies, it's listed in there very clearly. And any formal paperwork, schools typically send out mailers regularly. So in late July, early August, all those mailers include those reminders of these types of policies. And all of our classrooms have clearly displayed posters, very large, that explain the policy as well. And so there's some pictures here, and I was a principal for 10 years and up until last year, and these are some of my former teachers and students. And this is not necessarily required of teachers, but teachers who do have really good relationships and have sort of that mutual respect in their classroom. We have several teachers who've established an opportunity for students just to turn it in, to reduce the desire or that need. You know, if they feel that notification in their pocket, it is really difficult to ignore that. So a lot of our teachers are saying, hey, here's your chance, because if I see it in the classroom, you know, I'm going to have to send you up to the office, which we don't want. So here's your chance to turn it in. And most of the kids do it in those classrooms very easily without, you know, any sort of conflict. But all the teachers who are successful remind students regularly and are consistent with their implementation. You can go to the next slide. As far as administration, principals, assistant principals, their best practices, of course, it starts with communication and being really clear and open and transparent about why we're doing this and how it's going to support their students in the classroom. Lots of posters, of course, and literature around it. Administrators in middle and high school typically provide assemblies throughout the school year, and these are regular reminders in the assemblies. And the policy enforcement is critical for administrators. We have to implement the consequences if necessary when we reach those. So it's important that those teachers who are implementing the policies are supported by the administrators, and that if it's a first, second, or third offense, that they follow through with those restorative practices and or you know, progressive consequences. Go ahead, the next slide. And here are just in a nutshell, there's, you know, it starts off with the first offense, and it's all very restorative, even the first couple of offenses. We want to explain to you, you know, why we need you to follow this rule, how it's going to help you. We bring the parents or the guardians into the conversation, and we try to find alternate means of correction and supporting that student and that teacher. And it gets progressive, but it's always restorative. We always want to keep the student in the classroom whenever possible. And occasionally they do lose their phone privileges to have it on campus for a week or 2 weeks if they're habitually breaking this policy. But, you know, the worst or the highest offense might be suspension from that class for the day. They can't go to that class. They have to do their work in maybe the counseling office or something like that. But really every school, every teacher, every administrator tries to restore and repair all of the relationships so that the student can stay in the classroom. You can go ahead to the next one. And again, I think this is it. Communication is key, and it starts, you know, with some sort of campaign and really teaching and educating our families, our students on why it's so critical that they keep their classrooms phone free. We've seen, again, anecdotally, much better peer relationships as a result, much more social interaction as a result over the last year, much fewer, you know, conflicts in the classroom, in the hallways, and all of those things that come with texting and social media. We're seeing reductions. I don't have any hard data yet, but we look forward to sharing that broadly when we do have it. But consistent messaging and enforcement has been very positive to our success with this stronger policy. There has been no parent, really no parent pushback at all. And I'll just add that is, I think I fielded one phone call about that policy, and it was really just, can you explain it to me again? I don't really understand, you know, the rules. And it wasn't a complaint necessarily. So we're not really getting parent pushback because as parents, as you dads and moms out there know, it's difficult to manage that. So it's been really positive overall. So thank you for letting me share.
We really appreciate you. Thanks. And I know your talk actually answered some of the questions in the chat here. But if you don't mind sticking around, we'd love to maybe field some others from people who are interested. Senator Becker, turn it over to you for the northern perspective here.
Yeah, let's do. I'd like to bring on Principal Shu, and I know she's a presentation as well. And as you'll see, some schools are approaching this differently. I think with Principal Shu, we'll see it's more of a kind of complete phone ban during the day. And I'll note I talked to another school that recently. I had a friend at a school that how important the communication is, and that was something that was emphasized by our last speaker. But the communication part is really important, because in this other school, the communication was not handled well, and it did not end well. You probably know, Principal Shu, which school I'm talking about. But let's turn it over to you. We'd love to invite you to tell us a little about your experience.
And hey, just before you get started, to let everyone know, if I have to drop off, it's the start of a holiday in 9 minutes. So if you don't see me during Q&A, my staff is here and we'll be here to follow up with you. So Senator Becker, I may leave things in your capable hands to wrap up here, but I just wanted to say for everyone, we do want to get this question around emergencies answered too. So maybe you can touch on that, Principal Shu, in your presentation a little bit, but I know people, look, we've been through wildfires here, school shootings, we've seen it all in this district. So I just know it's on people's minds. So maybe you can touch on that one as you go along. Anyhow,
Absolutely.
thanks for joining.
Absolutely. One of the big ones that comes up. And thank you again, Senator Stern. We'll make sure and we'll coordinate on follow up to everyone, and questions that we don't get to, we'll try to address in some of the follow-up emails. Thank you. Go ahead, Principal Shu.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, Senator Stern and Senator Becker. My name is Yvonne Shu, and I am the principal at San Mateo High School, where we have been cell phone free since 2019, prior to the pandemic. Many schools already have cell phone policies, but what makes us different is that we are bell to bell. The beginning of the school day looks very different than the end of the school day. Before 8:30 and then after 3:30, the campus is filled with students looking down on their cell phones. However, once the bell rings, students have Yondr pouches, and each student is assigned a Yondr pouch where they lock their phones. So we do not have a cell phone ban, but students are not allowed to use their cell phones. You can see here that our staff started talking about cell phone use in November 2018. A group of our teachers were interested, and a former administrator took it on to do some investigation by looking across the bay. I believe it was San Lorenzo High School that was using Yondr pouches, and we decided to pilot. And so these group of teachers piloted the Yondr pouches within their own classrooms because there were issues with, the distractions, students on their phones instead of paying attention in class, academic dishonesty. And so after we did that, we decided that we would move forward with a cell phone free environment. It did take a number of town hall meetings with parents. And like you said, there was a huge issue with emergencies. And I'll go through that in just a little bit. At San Mateo High School, each student is given a Yondr pouch, and every classroom has a Yondr magnet. And all students sign a cell phone free agreement. So with each classroom having a Yondr magnet, I think that answers the question of emergencies. If there is an emergency, whether or not it is an active shooter or something else going on campus where we might have to secure the campus or lock down, we want our students to be able to pay attention and get direction from the adult that is in the classroom, because they will be going through what messages we will be sending them as far as, are they evacuating, are they staying put, and what is happening. We don't want students being distracted, texting their parents, and then having parents, rush the campus. But safety is our priority for our students, and we would like students to be able to pay attention, to all the directions that are given, and then the teacher can then unyonder students so they can contact their parents and let them know that they are okay, or give them their status of what is happening. These are some of the things that are on our cell phone free agreement, which both parents and students sign. So you can see that we do address smart watches, but primarily we look for cell phones in the pouches. Many of our students do have smart watches, but it's pretty obvious when you're staring down at your wrist on such a small screen. And if a student is distracted for a length of time during a classroom period, a teacher could make a referral to the office where we would have the student lock it up. All of our offices also have Yonder magnets. So if a student had to get in touch with their parent for any reason, they could come to the office. We have students who take online appointments, come down to the office where they're given a room for some privacy to do a therapy session, to be able to talk to a family member, perhaps check in with a family. If there is a family emergency, a member of the family is in the hospital, whatever it might be. So it's not like it's a complete and total ban in the respect that no cell phones are allowed. Students do carry their Yonder pouches with them at all times. We do give consideration cards. We still have some students that do not have a cell phone. And so thank you to those parents for not giving in to their student about having a cell phone. But the majority, probably 95% of our students, do have cell phones. Also, students who have medical conditions that need to check their blood glucose levels can unyonder at any time. They do have Yonders. Like I said, every student is given a Yonder on our campus. And students can ask to unyonder by coming to the office at any time. We are a one-to-one school, so every student does have a Chromebook, and so students are not cut off from the outside world. They can still GChat. However, with our one-to-one devices, we use Hapara, so teachers can monitor where students are on their laptops without to monitor students' use of their laptops to make sure that they are on the lesson and not watching a YouTube video or playing a video game. Yonder checks. We ask teachers to do a Yonder check during their class periods. However, students can self-report by going to student services if they forgot their Yonder pouch or if they forgot their phone at home. Students can turn in their phone and pick it up at the end of the day. They're given a pass. So when a teacher does a Yonder check, they can see that the student turned in their phone or they don't have a phone for the day, and there's no consequence. However, if they forgot their phone, students pick up a slip. They are given 4 passes, and upon the 5th, a detention is assigned. If we happen to find a student with a cell phone and perhaps have a burner phone in their Yonder pouch, it is a parent pickup. Some parents use that service as an advantage when they don't want to pick up the student phone and they want to have a more severe consequence. We have had parents leave the phones at school over the weekend for a few days, weeks at a time, because they would rather us keep it for safekeeping than bring it home and have a student rifle through the house trying to find their cell phone and get it back. So we have had families leave cell phones at school, and then they will call us and let us know that it's okay to give back the cell phone to the student. Like I said, teachers do Yonder checks throughout the day. It doesn't take up very much instructional time, because when they are giving a warm-up or walking around the classroom, checking students' homework, stamping notebooks, stamping papers, they can quickly do a Yonder check as well. Teachers also have the discretion for students to unyonder at any time during the class period for an activity, to listen to music while writing an English essay, use an app if they are on an assignment like a geometry class, and they need to measure angles, they'll use an app on their phone instead of a compass or some other device. We also have a digital photo class that sometimes they will use their phone to take pictures, but teachers will often notify the administration and then ensure that students are all yondered again before they leave for their next class period. Like I said, at San Mateo, it's a little different than some other school policies that we are bell to bell. So students do not have access to their phones during brunch, lunch, or during passing periods. Some of the challenges are broken yonders. Some students forget to yonder at the end of the day, and so they don't want to return to school, so they'll break open their yonder pouch, cut it open in order to get to their phone. They do have to pay $25 to replace them. The first yonder we provide for free, like a school material, because it is required. But if they break it or damage it in any way, there is a fine for a replacement. Another challenge are burner phones that some students have put their old phones in their yonder pouch and keep their working phone out. Much to the surprise of parents when we do some searches, because some students will report it anonymously that a student is using their phone, or we will find them in the bathrooms using their phone. So then those phones are confiscated for parent pickup. And, the problem also that not all teachers are doing yonder checks consistently. However, if you were to ask any of our teachers, they do not want to give up yonder and would probably quit teaching if we allowed cell phones again. Some of the benefits that people have shared with us: there's more student engagement in the class, students talking to each other, students looking at each other, participating in activities on a high school campus. Teenagers don't want to make fools of themselves, but when they don't have the risk of someone filming them and posting it online, they are more liable to participate in different activities and just have fun and be teenagers and laugh at each other and with each other, not making fun of each other for participating in an activity that we might have at a rally or a lunchtime activity. And of course, there are fewer distractions, that their phone isn't constantly vibrating or pinging every time they get a Snapchat, Instagram, or email message. Here are some things that parents shared with me in terms of their perspective regarding their students' use of phones, that with our yonder policy, they can't text mom if they fail a test or they have forgotten their lunch at home or their PE uniforms. Kids will often come to the office to use a phone, and if a parent sees that a phone call is coming from school, they tend to answer it. They also tend to answer if a student is calling, because they aren't supposed to be on their phone. So we do use it to that benefit. But independence, and students have to figure it out for themselves, and it takes a certain amount of stress off of parents who don't have the option to helicopter parent during the day for forgotten items like lunch, PE uniforms, and things like that. Last spring, we did a survey, and so here are some of the comments that students used or shared with us in terms of a cell phone-free campus and the impact that it's had on their mental health, on the amount of time that they are on their cell phone. So you can see a lot of positive things. Of course, we had some negative things that, students are like, we should get rid of yonder because they should be trusted not to use their phone during class time. But because of the way we have it set up at San Mateo High School, where it is through the entire school day, that would be much harder to manage in terms of during passing periods, which technically are counted as instructional time. And then just some questions to ponder prior to implementation for any of the educators out there is, what type of cell phone free environment do you want? What is your plan? And then how on board are you with a cell phone free environment? I know on occasion I do have to remind our staff not to walk through the hallways on their phones, that they should, take phone calls or to texting in their classrooms behind closed doors, because it just isn't good modeling behavior. And then deciding if you're doing it period by period or whole day, and then creating your rules and agreements, and then how do you collect data? I think that has been kind of the most difficult thing in terms of anecdotal data and measuring kind of the bullying. I will say, as an administrator, we don't deal with discipline that has to do with online bullying and harassment or academic integrity of, sharing or taking pictures of quizzes, tests, and sharing them with other classes. And so our discipline in cell phone violations is very high, but it's very low in some of those other areas. And then just a clarification, San Mateo High School, we are part of the San Mateo Union High School District, made up of 10 schools. But San Mateo High School is the only one that has a bell-to-bell policy. I believe all of our schools do have cell phone policies, but ours is slightly different. And so thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. I'm going to ask all of our panelists to come back on the screen. And there's a lot of questions. I feel like we could probably have got another hour here. Maybe we will revisit at some point. And as mentioned, Senator Stern had to drop off with family for a Jewish holiday. I'm going to look at a couple of the questions that came in advance. And again, some of these were discussed, so I'm just going to kind of rifle through a few and then just kind of get some of your reactions if you're willing to stay a little bit later than time. And then, as I said, we will try to send a robust follow-up to folks. A couple questions. Some teachers use cell phones for pedagogical reasons. Do you support keeping the ed code intact that allows for that to happen? So a couple questions on that. A junior at the school my son went to said, how do you enforce this rule since we're using iPads and laptops and phones as well? I agree that phones are a distraction. And I was really surprised. I kind of assumed that kids didn't have phones until I was texting my son one day and realized he was on his phone and able to check out a sports a result that was happening during the day during the playoffs. It was like, oh, he seemed to know everything that was happening. I was always very surprised. But a couple questions about ed tech and how that factors in. You did mention, I think, Principal Shu, how the Chromebooks you are able to monitor, but there's a few questions on that. The emergency question was asked, and it's probably worth a little follow-up discussion. You mentioned the Magnus. I don't think everybody knows how the Yondr devices work. I don't particularly, but I kind of gather it a little bit from your comment there. But that's always one of the big questions people ask, as Senator Stern alluded to as well. Enforcement, you both discussed that. But any other questions on or any other comments on enforcement? So I'll just bring on a few of those and see who wants to chime in.
I can talk pedagogy if you'd like.
Sure.
So yes, teachers have full, responsibility in the classroom if they want to use a phone app. As Principal Shu mentioned, that's completely appropriate within the realm of, instruction, and it does happen a lot in math. But there's other classrooms where there are some things that students can use their phones for, and/or the teacher. So yes, it's completely within the teacher's ability to choose to do that or not. And then as far as safety goes, I think it was mentioned maybe in one of my slides. We have safety plans in our schools. Our teachers are trained in our safety plans, and as part of that training, they have to teach our students what to do in situations when they arise. So how do they access their phones? In and an active assailant or a fire drill or what earthquake drill, whatever, that is part of the training that teachers and students get. And so students are given instructions on how and when to, take out their phones when appropriate. But to Principal Shu's point is we don't want students getting ahead of the information and putting out information that's not accurate and causing more concern. So it is part of the safety plan and the training teachers get and the training ultimately that students receive in how to access their phones and when to use them.
Yes, great. And the schools, I imagine, as you allude to, will do their own communication to parents in the event of an emergency. And so I think it's partly sometimes just parents just taking a step back and being okay with that and knowing that there are plans in place. Great. Either of you, Principal Shu or Dr. Singal, any comments on any of those set of questions? Dr. Singal, there's some question in the Q&A about sharing your research and publications, and we can do some of that maybe in our follow-up. There was interest in the Korean experience as well. My sense is that they do have kind of full age verification. Is that right?
Yeah. So South Korea regulates social media in some different ways than the United States. One is full age verification to ensure that the users of the platforms are indeed 13 and above. The United States currently does not have robust age verification, although that's one of a regulation that's being considered by multiple states as well as the federal government. In South Korea as well, they enforce parental consent for 13 to 19-year-old accounts. So at least parents have to consent for their child to open an account on a social media platform. So the parent's at least aware that their child has it. Of course, there are ways of getting around that, but it does increase awareness a bit. And then the third thing is that for minors' accounts, social media companies can be held liable for recommending violent, sexual, and otherwise distressing content. And so it's in the platform's best interest not to push that content to minors. And so the content that they see is different as well. And I have a long-term project ongoing in South Korea, and we're trying to untangle which, if any of these regulations are the ones that account for the findings that I described.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Menares, there's also a question about smartwatches for elementary and middle school. Are they also put away all day in elementary and middle school?
So smartwatches are treated like a smartphone if they become used like a smartphone. They're a little bit harder to use for social media and things like that. You can certainly text or send a thumbs up or something, but teachers treat it like a cell phone if and when it becomes that level of distraction. In other words, if they're doing more than checking their time on the watch, then the teacher will engage in that conversation and, again, follow the same steps as they would. But that has yet to be, the biggest concern. The watches, while they're becoming more common and with the holidays approaching, more kids may have them, but that doesn't seem to be the bigger issue for the classrooms right now. It's definitely the cell phone and the earbuds currently.
And Principal Shu, how do you handle earbuds? And is that part of the cell phone policy?
Yeah, we actually, students used earbuds. We went to one to kind of wean them off of it, so that if there was an emergency, they could still hear us, instead of having two in and blocking everything out. We tried to enforce like no hoods so they can't hide them underneath their hair or underneath their hoods. But it doesn't seem to be that much of an issue in terms of, if a student is listening to music, we can definitely tell if they're using their earbud to like talk on their phone or do other things, that it was, decided like, let's, work on one earbud only. And, we are still cell phone free during the, rest of the day. And so we've kind of left it as that. And if it becomes a huge issue, I'm sure as a faculty, we will discuss it on kind of next steps.
And how do they even listen to music? Is because if the cell phone's put away, is it through another device or is
Well, yeah, the Yonder pouches don't have like, RFID technology. They, can speak to Siri through like the pouch. And so, all the notifications, things like that are off, but they can still, have access in that way. Most students, though, I think, have their cell phones like off. There are the occasional, few students that, the one earbud, is in, but as long as they are aware of their surroundings and it's not a distraction in class, we're fine with it.
Got it. Yeah. Well, good. Just to be clear, the bill that was referenced, 3216 that passed this year, the governor signed. So that requires all schools to have a policy to limit or block is either by January 1st, 2026. So that is the current state of that policy. I want to be clear, just so people know. And again, that's why it's so important to have this conversation. And I'm sure we'll get questions maybe from other schools and teachers as well, who are looking ahead to say, hey, what are our schools going to do? And learn from the two examples that we have here as well. And then we mentioned a few other policies that we've passed. One of that, I'll just ask quickly, is something that I've dealt with my schools, which is if there's problematic content posted on social medias, do you find that the companies will take that down if you get in touch with them? Because we've had legislation to try to require a specific certain channel for educators to be able to contact the companies and get problematic content taken down. Just curious, do either of you have experience with that?
I've never personally gone to a social media platform. We typically work with our school resource officers when it gets to that level of complexity, especially if a crime was committed. So we would typically work with our school resource officers and our local police department who have more resources than a school site principal would at their fingertips to handle some of those more complex issues with social media.
We also do the same. However, on some of the platforms, I will rally our teachers to send, I can't remember, like send messages to, Instagram or, Discord or wherever they're posting things or hosting, things that are potentially harming to any of our students, to take it down because, they're, kind of just allowing students to post some pretty awful things about one another that is just very harmful. That hasn't proven to be very successful because students make up, a bunch of different accounts and then pass it along kind of like generational, and, it kind of is like a burn book, viral burn book. Companies are not very receptive at taking things down when I know, like, we've been bombarding them, and I have, like, asked parents, like, please, like, email, whoever it is necessary to say this is harmful. But, it hasn't been done, unfortunately.
Yeah. We did pass two bills that this past year. This is something I've worked on, and Senator Umberg passed a bill around requiring social media platforms to provide staffed hotline to respond to law enforcement requests for information and to comply with a search warrant within 72 hours. So that was one bill that got passed. And my great colleague, Assemblymember Lowenthal, passed a bill requiring social media platforms to establish a mechanism for verified reporters to report social media related threats and substantially respond to such reports within 72 hours or 24 hours if the report is of a severe risk. So it's something that we're continuing to work on. So please keep me posted as that content is not getting taken down. All right, we are about 10 minutes over, so we're going to wrap up. Any quick final words from each of you, and then we'll wrap up.
Just thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate your leadership and Governor Newsom's leadership. this is important work. And so thank you for, again, leading this charge for our students and their academic success and future success. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just to chime in, thank you. These types of conversations are really important in opening it up to educators and parents and policymakers. And to anyone still listening, I'm more than happy to talk further outside of this and share any of the research that I talked about today. So thank you.
Right.
Yes, I echo everybody's sentiments here. I appreciate all the work that has been, done. I'm lucky that, some of our parents will choose my high school because we are cell phone free and we have a policy that is bell to bell, and others that, refuse to give up their phones. So I wish good luck in creating some fair and equitable cell phone policies for schools who have yet to take this on. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your leadership and research. I want to thank you, everyone, for watching, and thank my colleague, Senator Stern, for all of his work and passion and leadership and commitment on this issue. Thanks again, of course, to the first partner, Jennifer Siebel Newsom. And thanks to all of you. We'll see you at the next town hall.